Well, our Northern Ireland correspondent Mark Simpson is outside the Army barracks in County Antrim now. And Mark, this is a pretty shocking incident, isn't it?
Yeah, these are testing times for Northern Ireland. A reminder of very dark days indeed. The most serious attack by dissident Republicans since the Omagh bomb atrocity 11 years ago, when 29 people were killed. 2 soldiers were killed here last night. 4 others were wounded, at least one of them critically wounded. We haven't had an update yet on that man's condition.
When I first heard about this, Mark, it took me back to really when I was in Northern Ireland. It seems really out of place in the modern world.
Very much so, and people this morning waking up to news 2 people have been shot dead overnight. It really is a throwback to the bad old days. But just to put it into some sort of context, these dissident Republican groups, they're not another IRA as it stands at the moment. They don't have the same weaponry, they don't have the same numbers of personnel, they don't have the same level of public support. In fact, they've got virtually no public support. They don't have a political wing. And for all those reasons, security forces here, the police, the Chief Constable, the Secretary of State, I think they'll all be saying later today that they're confident that they can tackle this small group.
And the authorities did have a bit of a warning this might take place. They knew some sort of incident was imminent. Given that, it's surprising the army base wasn't more alert.
Yes, I think that's something that we'll have to put to army and police chiefs when they talk, and as you said, that's expected to be in the next couple of hours. There are political questions too. It's perhaps a side issue at a time like this, but we know Sinn Féin made it very clear that they thought the police were exaggerating the threat from these dissident groups. I think what happened last night tells a very different story, and I think some unionists will be asking Sinn Féin when they talk later today some pretty tough questions.
And presumably within the Republican community, something will be being done, because that's always the nature of these things.
That's right, and I think as far as the police are concerned, I think one of the things they'll be saying later on today is, can anyone help the authorities? Did anyone see something suspicious last night that they can now help to track down the gunman who was basically bent on mass murder last night that opened fire on this base behind me? We know in the past Republicans have been very reluctant to talk to the police. As you say, these are new times in Northern Ireland, and we'll just see just how much cooperation they get today or not.
All right, Mark Simpson, our Northern Ireland correspondent. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's speak now to Ian Paisley Jr., a DUP member of the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Policing Board. Ian Paisley, well, you've made your reaction pretty clear on this.
Well, can I just say at the outset that I want to make an expression of grief to the families of those who have lost their loved ones who were doing a duty of service to everyone in Northern Ireland, protecting them, helping them, and the reward they get is to be gunned down in a brutal and awful and horrible way last night. And I just want to express our sadness to them and our utter condemnation for the futility of people who would put their minds and their actions to this. I believe we have a very, very clear example of people who want to rip Northern Ireland apart, who can't handle the fact that Northern Ireland is at peace, who can't handle the fact that Northern Ireland was developing and moving to a new place, a better place. And their only response is one of violence and brutal murder, and they have to be utterly and roundly condemned for that.
Are you surprised that Sinn Féin hasn't spoken out on this yet?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, the entire nationalist political leadership has been caught napping. Our Chief Constable for the last 9 months has been warning this community that, look, dissident Republican threat is at its all-time high. It's growing, it's developing. The response from nationalists has been, I might say, quite pathetic. They have taken the view that the Chief Constable is exaggerating things, or they've taken the view that let's not talk about this publicly. They condemned him for asking and getting additional support from the reconnaissance movement. And what happens whenever there then is, his words are almost proved to be right, that there is this threat, that it's at its highest level and that people have lost their lives? Little wonder there's silence at the moment from nationalists, because they have really been shown up to be pretty poor in their attempt to analyse the situation for what it is. This is a serious situation in terms of security. We need all the help that we can get from the police. If the police require additional help from the army, they need that help. If it's reconnaissance help they need, then they should get it without question. And I think that nationalists now must respond, because we're at a crossroads. We're at a point where everyone has to either say they're on the side of peace, they're on the side of law and order, they're on the side of hunting down the men of violence, or else they're on the side of supporting that. And Northern Ireland has no place for those people who want to support the sort of barbarous activities we saw last night.
So what would you want, bearing that in mind, Martin McGuinness and the other members of Sinn Féin to do?
Well, I think they have to recognise now how serious the threat is posed against the entire community. And whilst I'm sure we will get words of condemnation very, very soon, I think we have to now have a more mature reflection upon whenever the Chief Constable requires additional support. He's not saying it to wind nationalists up. He's not saying it to drag people back to the bad old days. He's saying it because he wants to see this society protected from the men of violence, and he wants the best support and the most capable people in that battle of law and order versus terror and disorder.
Ian Paisley Jr., thank you very much indeed. Well, the SDLP leader Mark Durkan joins me now on the line. What does this mean for Northern Ireland, Mark Durkan?
Well, it's obviously very, very worrying indeed. The fact is we've known for a long time that Republican dissidents have been trying to build up to a spectacular in their book. They have been trying to build up to a situation where they could kill a police officer. We know that in recent times they have obviously been looking at military targets as well, because there was a car bomb that appeared to be destined for Ballykilner in County Down. So we have known that for some time. And contrary to what Ian Paisley Jr. has been saying, we in the SDLP have been making the point for a long time that parties, rather than singling each other out with different tests about do you condemn this and how well do you condemn that, that the best way in which we could confound the sinister agenda of Republican dissidents, the best way that we could defy their twisted logic, would be to get to completion on the devolution of justice and policing, to show that we had sealed the new beginning to politics, and also to show that we had sealed the beginning to policing, because that's the best way of undermining what these people have been at and have been trying to build up in terms of support and argument. And of course, while we have been making that point, it has actually been Ian Paisley Jr. and the DUP who have dismissed that as an issue, and they're the people who were saying that they didn't, that they thought we were exaggerating that issue, contrary to what Ian Paisley Jr. has just been telling you.
That's the danger, isn't it? All this descends into a political dispute when Northern Ireland needs to be pulling together.
Exactly, and that's why sealing the devolution for justice and policing is going to be so important. I mean, what people will want to see here is a strong, shared, united democratic response, and the best way to do that is by showing full democratic ownership and legitimacy of all the policing and justice arrangements, because the Republican dissidents, when they have carried out attacks on police personnel and when they have been issuing other threats to the public and particularly to people associated with policing, they have used the old language of Crown forces and British police force, etc., etc. And so the best way of disarming them of that sort of nonsense is to complete on the devolution of justice and policing. And what we need to see is that strong, united response. I mean, these people will try to content themselves, oh, this is a big attack on the British Army.
Well, it was only a couple of days ago. Well, hold on, it was only a couple of days ago that, of course, Sinn Féin was saying that they didn't like the idea of British Special Forces being sent to Northern Ireland. What would you like to hear from Sinn Féin now?
Well, secondly, to be honest, we made it very clear at the policing board and elsewhere that we were very unhappy about the whole way that business had happened, because the Chief Constable had taken that decision. The Chief Constable is meant to be accountable, and at no point was that shared with the policing board. And what happened was that information became public in circumstances where it seems that it was Republican dissident sources who told the BBC that had happened. So that we had a ludicrous situation where people who are meant to be in the know, people who are meant to be part of accountability in terms of policing, didn't know, weren't being told by the Chief Constable, and the media were being told by the very people who were meant to be the target of that. That was the biggest issue and criticism that we had the other day. We never underestimated the threat or argued against it. Sinn Féin will speak for themselves, and the fact is those who are carrying out this violence are still steeped in the mindset and methods that Sinn Féin and the provisional movement justified and used for so long during the Troubles. But Sinn Féin are in a different place now, and I hope they will join with the rest of us in showing a shared and determined commitment that these people, whatever the violence they're steeped in, they're not going to plunge the rest of us back into that sort of past.
All right, Mark Durkan of the SDLP, thank you very much indeed for joining us.